Here's what nobody tells you about running a 7-figure-a-year agency. Multiple times a week, you probably want to burn the whole thing to the ground. You've got decision fatigue. By the time you get home, you can't even decide what you want for dinner because you made 150 decisions that day. Everything has to go through you. You are the bottleneck. Typically at 7 figures or just under, the agency has grown because you've got some skills, you've got a bit of a network, people have hired you to get a thing done. And you've brought on team members, and now all those team members are looking at you, and you are literally the constraint to the growth of your own agency. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to unlock that constraint. I'll give you some very practical things you can do so that you can get out of the way and your agency can grow without you, and hopefully you don't want to burn the whole thing to the ground. So this is typically what we see with the agencies that we work with is you've got inputs at the top of the agency, you've got client requests, you've got approvals, you've got decisions that need to be made, you've got ideas from clients, and everything's coming into the agency super fast, right? And people are expecting things faster and cheaper than ever because of AI. And at the bottom, you've got stuff that you deliver for your clients. You've got campaigns, you've got assets, you've got creative, right? And these are all the outputs or the deliverables that you're responsible for. Well, just like sand through the hourglass, there's a very small window in the middle through which all this information can travel, right? And that's typically you. You're here. And if you're approving creative and you're approving campaigns and you're approving copy and you're approving ideas that are being delivered to your clients, people have to wait for things. And this is where most agencies get stuck because you don't trust that your team members are going to make the same decision that you would if you weren't in the room, okay? Let me show you the alternative. What we see where agency owners get out of the way is you have kind of what we call swim lanes, right? And so you have all the inputs at the top. I'm just going to categorize all the stuff that comes into the agency at the top, and then all the outputs and the deliverables that you're responsible for. But typically what happens is the information flows freely through the agency. It might actually jump a swim lane, go to another team member, might go to an AI tool, might go to a piece of software to get something done, and then it might come back to the account manager. So you can jump swim lanes, but there's no constraint holding this information back from flowing. Information, data, decisions, conversations can flow freely through the agency because there's no rubber band around the middle of it holding that information up, okay? And this is where you want to be. This might be where you are now. This is where you want to be. And so in the rest of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to unlock that flow in your agency. That means your agency is just going to grow a lot faster. So typically at this point in the agency, we'll hear agency owners complain and blame things like scope creep. Their clients asking for things that were never in scope. And there's no clear roadmap for a client. And so the client doesn't know what we're working on and we don't know what we're supposed to be working on. Paid discovery, by the way, is really the magic bullet there, and I'll make more videos about that in the coming weeks. Or they might say that we need more SOPs, that the team don't know which process to follow. But the real question is, why are all these decisions and approvals coming to the founder's desk? Why doesn't anyone else in the agency, in the business, have the authority to make these decisions and just keep the information moving and keep deliverables going out the door? Like, why is it that the founder is responsible, and why does the founder become the bottleneck? And it's usually because team members are responsible for tasks, not outcomes. Let me explain. The mechanic here that is going to unlock the growth of your agency and help you a lot is job scorecards. We adopted job scorecards probably 4 or 5 years ago in our business, and it just gave the whole team a lot of clarity about who's responsible for what. Here's what happens when no one knows who's responsible for a particular outcome. What happens is one of two things. Either people point at each other and say, well, I thought you were doing it, or worse, I mean, that's a bad outcome, but worse, multiple people try and do the same job at the same time, which is also not great. It leads to confusion and delay, as the fat controller in Thomas used to say. Are we still allowed to call him the fat controller? I don't know. I heard a Thomas episode recently and they still called him the fat controller. So I don't know. If that's not PC, I'm sorry. But the controller used to say, you've caused confusion and delay. And this is what happens when people aren't clear about the outcomes they're responsible for, right? So job scorecards are the mechanic that's going to change this. I'll walk you through a job scorecard in a moment. But typically what happens is when you're starting out in business, you hire people based on availability. And that's because you're exhausted, you're cooked, you're overwhelmed, you've got too much work on, you need to hire someone quickly. And so you hire them based on availability. And this is a mistake because if you hire someone based on availability, what happens is you end up teaching them your process. And I would suggest that your process is just, I say this, with all due respect, but I reckon your process might just be a little bit shit or a bit half-baked, right? Because you're running around with your hair on fire trying to keep everyone happy and you haven't had time to document your processes. You haven't had time to document your SOPs, right? I mean, if you did, you wouldn't be watching this video. You would have done it by now. You would have hired someone, they'd be following the process and everything would be hunky-dory. But it's not because you haven't had time to do it. And so you hire someone based on availability and then you try and teach them your process. We're not running a community college here, kids. We're actually running a business and we need people to come into the business and start delivering outcomes and start helping us achieve our business goals. So instead of hiring based on availability, the goal is you want to hire based on ability. Let's hire someone who's done the job before and has a proven track record. And here's a radical idea. Let's get them to bring their process with them and document it inside our business. Now, I know that feels like cheating, but let me just explain something to you. If you're a business owner, you're taking all the risk. Your name's on the door. You've probably got an LLC or a proprietary limited company entity, a legal entity set up. You can get your ass sued if you do the wrong thing. Your team member can't get sued because they'll just say, well, I work for Bozo and Bozo has the company and so you need to sue the company which is owned by Bozo. Guess what? You and me are Bozo, right? We're taking all the risk. So it's okay if we hire people who know what they're doing, bring them into our business and then have them document their process to strengthen and improve the value of our business. That's totally okay. In fact, that is literally the name of the game. You can't document the processes and then hire people because there's one of you and there's going to be more than one of them. So how are you going to find the time to do that? It's just not feasible. Also, you're probably not the best person to document the process because you're not the best person to do the job. You're a jack of all trades. You're a visionary. That's what makes you an entrepreneur. Unless you have deep knowledge around one specific thing. But if you're an agency owner, you probably let that go some time ago and now you're in the business of building something bigger than you. And so you've forgotten how to develop, you've forgotten how to run ads, you've forgotten how to write copy, you've forgotten how to design. There are other people who are better at that than you and you should hire them and get them to bring their process, okay? So let me walk you through the mechanics of how this works. Typically, and yes, I'm going to draw on the iPad and it's been a while, so bear with me. Typically what happens is, I need to put my glasses on because I can't see what I'm doing. Typically what happens when you start the process of hiring people and you're kind of new in the game, you hire someone and you delegate tasks to them, right? And so you say, hey, I've been doing this thing. I've been doing it this way. I don't want to do it anymore. I need you to come in. I need you to do this so I can concentrate on getting better clients or thinking about more marketing or thinking about starting a podcast or a YouTube channel or learning how to draw on iPad or whatever it is. And so I need you to come in to take some of these tasks off my plate, okay? And that's not a bad idea. It's just not sustainable and it's not scalable for all the reasons that we've spoken about. What happens is they get through halfway through the task list and they go, hey, Bozo, I don't know what to do here. The task list isn't complete. Something happened that's not on the task list and I'm stuck. What do I do? And you go, oh, holy shit, now I've got to make a decision on your behalf. When you trust this team member, you get to a point where you start delegating decisions, right? And that looks something like this. I learned this from my mate, Mike McHenry, who runs a self-managed super fund auditing business, right? And he said to me one day, you ever wonder why your team go home at 5 o'clock and you're still there at 8 o'clock at night? I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? He said, well, you're doing their job for them because they ask you questions and you answer them. And so every time they get stuck, they go, oh, don't worry about it. Bozo will fix it. They come and ask you a question and you fix it, right? So here's what you do instead. When they ask you a question, you say, I don't know, Jimmy, what do you think we should do? In fact, he taught me this little framework, which I'll give you now. When someone asks me a question, I say, before you ask me a question, have you got two possible outcomes? Have you got two possible answers, path A, path B? No? Great, don't ask me a question. Go away and figure out path A and path B, then come back and ask me the question. When they come back and ask you the question, they say, well, here's the question, here's path A, here's path B. You go, great. What do you think we should do, Jimmy? And Jimmy says, well, I don't know, Bozo, I was leaning towards path A. And you go, great, that's what I'd do as well. Off you trot, and you go home at 5 o'clock, and so does Jimmy, and everyone's happy. And then you get to a point where you just can't make any more decisions, okay? And so when you trust your staff enough and you've been around and you've been in business long enough, you get to a point where you realize the only way for you not to be the rubber band around the middle of the hourglass, the only way to unlock that constraint and to free you up and actually to free up the growth of your agency is you need to start delegating outcomes. So what you do is you make people responsible for delivering an outcome. Now, if they're responsible for delivering an outcome, and let's be clear, we need to know what the outcome looks like. We need to know what a gold standard is. We need to know what the finish line looks like. We need to know what it feels like when we've got the gold medal around our neck. They are going to have to make a whole bunch of decisions, and they are going to have to design their task list to get there. I don't care if they use Asana or ClickUp or shout at each other in Slack or fax each other. I couldn't care less. As long as the outcome is delivered and they're operating within the values of our brand and we're in alignment in terms of where we're going, where we're taking the business and what we're trying to do here, how we serve our customers, happy days. They can make the decision and they can design the task list. So imagine, an airport operating where there's one person who makes all the air traffic control decisions. The planes just wouldn't take off, they wouldn't land, they'd get stuck, right? So you can't be the sole point of contact and the sole point of decisions, right? Imagine a very busy restaurant where every meal needs to go through the head chef's hands. It just cannot happen. It is not sustainable. It's not scalable. And here's the other thing that people don't tell you is when you get to this point where you have decision fatigue, you start making bad decisions because you want to make quick decisions. You want to get them off your plate. You can't think anymore. You're exhausted. So you just make a decision so that problem goes away, and you start making very bad decisions that over time compound. And then you have to come in and pick up the pieces and fix things because you've made a whole bunch of bad decisions in the past because you were responsible for too many decisions and no one else was responsible for outcomes. So what I'm going to do now is just walk you through the minimum viable job scorecard. And then I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do tomorrow morning when you go to work, okay? So the minimum viable job scorecard is this. You have each role in the business is responsible for no more than 3 outcomes. How many? 3. 1, 2, 3. No more than 3 outcomes. Now, some of these outcomes might be evergreen. In other words, they're responsible for it all year round. And some of these outcomes might be in alignment with your quarterly strategy. If you don't have a quarterly strategy, we should talk. You've got a quarterly strategy that you're trying to get done this quarter. So some team members' outcomes might be quarterly and some might be evergreen. The idea is that you just want to put the outcome name at the top, outcome 1, outcome 2, and outcome 3. And then underneath that, you want to put the numbers that show you whether or not that outcome is successful, whether or not that outcome has been achieved. Some people will call these OKRs, right? So the outcome is the objective and the key results are, well, how do we know that this outcome has been achieved? And so I just like to think of these as SMART goals, right? They need to be specific, measurable, and you want to have no more than 3 numbers for each outcome, right? People can't remember anything more than 3. So if I know that my outcome is this, and so for example, a task for an account manager is to handle all incoming client requests. An outcome for an account manager is to reduce client churn to less than 5%. See the difference here? If I say to an account manager, part of your role is to reduce client churn or keep client churn under 5% quarter on quarter, they have to figure out the tasks. They have to make a bunch of decisions to achieve that outcome. Now, am I here to help them as the agency owner? Absolutely. I've got a lot of experience. I've been doing this a long time, mentored over 4,500 agencies all over the planet. I know a thing or two, right? But it's not my job to reduce client churn. It's their job to manage their book of clients and make sure that their book has less than 5% churn. So here's what I want you to do tomorrow morning when you go to work. I want you to think about what your org chart needs to look like in 12 months' time. What does your agency look like in 12 months' time? And which roles do you need on that org chart? Just go to Whimsical or one of your favorite design tools and mock up an org chart as to what you imagine it might look like in 12 months' time. And then pick one key role that you need to hire for, or someone in the agency that you know is not performing right now, probably because they don't have clarity about what they're supposed to be doing, or they might just be in the wrong seat, which is also a possibility, and design a job scorecard for them. You can Google job scorecard and get a bunch of templates, but I'll tell you, most of it's fluff. The only thing that you want to make sure that's on that job scorecard is that they understand the outcomes that they are responsible for and the numbers that we're going to use to measure whether or not that outcome has been achieved and whether or not they are succeeding in their role. And here's the other thing that no one's going to tell you and that people just don't talk about. Your team members want to know that they're doing meaningful work. They want to know that they're actually making a positive contribution to the business and to your clients, right? And it's really hard to do that if they don't have a scoreboard to point to, right? Sports people, elite athletes, they know if they're performing because they can look at the stats and go, check that out, that was a personal best. Or look at this, for some reason I'm in a bit of a funk and I'm not performing very well because my numbers are down. Well, if your team members don't have numbers, how the frickin' hell do they know whether or not they're performing? So it's actually an act of kindness to make sure that your team members, every team member in the agency, including you, the agency owner, also known as the CEO, and that's a whole other conversation. I'll make another video about your scorecard as a CEO. Every team member in your business needs a job scorecard and they need to know which outcomes they're responsible for and they need to know the metrics that we're all using to measure the success of their contribution. All right, I hope you found that helpful. Get that exercise done. Let me know in the comments which role you're going to write a job scorecard for, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. I'm Troy Dean. Let's get to work.